Schönen guten Tag zusammen. Mein Name ist Thomas Breitinger. Ich bin der Büroleiter von Meyer Vidorno in Deutschland, bekannt als Dienstleister für Indien. Und seit unserer Fusion mit Altios sind wir weltweit der führende Dienstleister für Internationalisierung und bieten unsere Leistungen in 23 Ländern weltweit an, mit eigenen Gesellschaften vor Ort. So auch in Brasilien. Wir haben zu unserem Webinar heute 60 Teilnehmer. Das freut uns sehr. Schön, dass alle da sind. Vorab noch was Organisatorisches. Sie sind alle stumm geschaltet und haben aber die Möglichkeit, Fragen zu stellen, indem Sie diese rechts in den Chat schreiben. Also den finden Sie in dem Bedienfeld rechts. Falls Sie eher individuelle Fragen haben, die Sie jetzt nicht im Rahmen von diesem Webinar besprechen möchten, dann können Sie uns dazu gerne eine Mail schreiben. Wir freuen uns, Ihre Fragen dann zu beantworten, auch im Nachgang. Außerdem wird das Webinar noch aufgezeichnet und auf Wunsch lassen wir Ihnen natürlich gerne den Link zu der Aufzeichnung zukommen, so wie auch die Präsentation. Sie brauchen also nicht mitschreiben. So now I will switch to English and hand over the stage to my colleague, Mr. Didier Koch and Sergio Costa from Brazil. Stage is all yours, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. I am Didier Koch, Director of Altios Brazil. We have been in Brazil for almost 15 years, and we are specialists of business development. We are specialists of headhunting and payroll hosting of employees, incorporation and administration of foreign companies, negotiation of joint venture, and also merge and acquisition operations.
Hi, my name is Sergio Costa. I'm a mechanical engineer with a master's degree in organizational leadership, and I have an extensive, more than 20 years bringing foreign direct investment into Brazil and helping foreign companies maneuver in the Brazilian context for business. And it's a great honor for me to be here with you today, and I take this time to thank Altios International and Meyer Vidorno for inviting me to share some of my insights with you. Proceeding with our presentation, you have already our slide on screen. We put this picture about São Paulo, Brazil on purpose because many people have different views of what Brazil looks like. Brazil is a mix of different Brazils. I used to tell this to foreign companies, and we have to see it from its different perspectives. And yes, Brazil has to be seen as multiple countries within a single country. So we coexist with the modern and the history. We coexist with the advancements in technology and things that we still have to develop. But long story short is that Brazil is a place of opportunities that has to be looked from the closer perspective. Going on our agenda, which is the next slide, today we're going to cover the next topics. So next slide, please. First, I'm going to give a very short brief on how the Brazilian economy is evolving, not from the number perspective, but actually from procedural issues that Brazil is currently facing in order to remain more competitive or become more competitive if compared to other nations. Then Didier Koch will address the corporate checkup, and then he will conclude this presentation. So the picture we have here, could you go back one, please? The picture we have here about bureaucracy shows us how we see it. Bureaucracy is often a pile of paperwork that it's hard to deal with, to cope with, and we often say that, well, it's too much for me to go through. But the same bureaucracy that Brazilian companies have to face, any foreign company established in Brazil has to face the same bureaucracy. So there has been, from recent years on, a huge effort in Brazil to minimize the red tape, cut the red tape, reduce the bureaucracy, and make sure that things that do not make sense anymore, they will be extinguished in terms of procedures, and they will be changed into things that make more sense and make the lives of businesses less burdened caused by bureaucracy. But I used to tell investors, which country does not have its own bureaucracy? It's not an excuse. We are just addressing those things. And so next slide, please. So what has Brazil done recently to give foreign companies and local companies with a better business environment? Since 2017, Brazil has increased the pace in implementing changes, and those changes basically aim at, first, to provide the whole society and business environment with a better business atmosphere. It's things that has been done one way only, they now became being done in a different way, because Brazil has compared itself to other nations, and we have to improve the business environment to grant businesses with a larger transparency. How are things done? How it has to be clear for everyone. Things that companies are looking for, the laws and the bureaucracy has to be flexible enough to accommodate the advancements of new technologies and make sure that the companies will be able to cope in the business environment. More predictability. Many companies suffered in Brazil and still suffer when laws and the tax issues are changed overnight, and all of a sudden they have to adjust themselves to something that they were not able to predict. So long story short, predictability is something that companies desire, and the governments at all levels are working to make sure that changes do not happen that fast, and that it's more predictable. And obviously, everyone seeks for legal certainty, things that will give you a longer horizon to work with and understand that you are complying with everything. Less bureaucracy, which is a claim of the nation for everyone. For example, the pandemics, which is hitting all nations very seriously, has brought something that we loved, is that the notarial procedures have been made simpler, because now we are using video conferencing and digital signatures to make sure that everything goes smoothly. So yes, we're taking some positive aspects from all. But it's important that most companies, the private sector itself, is the one which is claiming for more competitiveness and less costly governments at all levels. So that's what we are doing. On next slide, I'm gonna share with you some examples of how this thing has been addressed and changes that have been taking place in many cases. For example, previously we had the chance that a judge would cancel a contract, which he or she would consider this to be an unbalanced relationship between two companies. So they were able to cancel a contract out of nothing. So now it's forbidden because of the new economic freedom law, which has been approved. The new labor law, which was approved in 2017, for example, it replaced an old law of 1943. And this as a result, we can see immediate major benefits to employers, because now we have added things which make possible, for example, working from your home, which is now during the pandemic is so critical to everyone. More flexible ways of hiring people and dismissing people from your business. For example, in the past, after you have dismissed an employee, the employee could sue a company after the termination of the contract. Now it's not like that. Once it's terminated, and even if the employee comes with a suit, the former employee will have to pay for all the expenses. So as a direct result of that, we have seen a decrease by 50% in all the suits against companies made by former employees. So this is something to show that on a concrete basis that yes, changes are taking place. The pension reforms, which were approved in 2019, they are expected to bring balance in public accounts, which is desperately needed from everyone. So it was approved in a record time of 1 year after discussion. Something that is which is in progress now is the independence of the Brazilian Central Bank. Very important. And again, it will shield the bank from changes in governments and that kind of stuff. The possibility of keeping banking accounts in US dollars in Brazil, it's currently under study, but this is something that today is not possible. But if this comes along, this is going to put Brazil to a new pattern if compared to other nations. And talking about comparing Brazil to other nations, Brazil's willingness to applicate to OECD definitely will require the country to comply with other standards set by OECD. So that brings to me a very positive aspect, because this will make Brazil not only adjust itself, for example, to the transfer pricing new policies established by the OECD, but it will also help Brazil upgrade in other senses, that it will be able to incorporate best practices that the OECD requires to its member countries. Another issue which we believe that is key for me to bring to you as an insight from someone who lives and works in Brazil is that there has been increasing investments in infrastructure through public-private partnerships and concessions nationwide. And this is addressing the major bottlenecks of the Brazilian infrastructure, which end up increasing the costs of operating in Brazil, but they are addressing those bottlenecks to give more flexibility, agility, and improve our infrastructure, improving logistics, improving the way you do business here, and facilitating the moving of people and merchants and goods to make sure that you will be able to go forward. So something that is still on our radar screen, and I look desperately forward to that, and major companies do as well, is an urgent need for the tax reforms in Brazil. And tax reforms is not as simple as someone might say, because you have to convene the interests of municipalities, states, and the federal government as a whole. So this is something for you to keep on radar screen. Do not put your expectations that this is going to be done this year. But yes, if Brazil wants to remain competitive, it has to address the tax reforms at all levels, national, state, and municipal. And so wrapping up my speech now for the introduction of this webinar, there are some major conclusions. So next slide, please. Major conclusions that we can infer here. The first of them for you to keep in mind, if you have an operation in Brazil, or if you want to come to Brazil, is that yes, Brazil is becoming more liberal, which is something new in the country's history. Brazil has always been very conservative, closed economy, but if it wants to do business with the whole world, it needs to be more open. And the economic development policies, which used to be driven by government itself, now they become more market driven, because we're looking at what the global markets are doing, what other nations are doing. We are competing against other nations regarding foreign direct investment and everything else. But long story short, the idea here is that yes, Brazil is looking at the best practices and is implementing those from the corporate side, not just from bureaucratic standpoint of someone who designs a policy out of nothing. It's actually something that the market, global market, is demanding these economic changes for Brazil. And in terms of foreign direct investment, Brazil remains a very, very important destination still. Just for you to have an idea, in Brazil, we have more than 1,400 companies which are direct investment from German companies in Brazil. So German subsidiaries operating in Brazil. So, and they have been here for some of them for more than 6 decades. So it does not mean that Brazil is without a problem, but it means that it is a country with opportunities for everyone. So German companies should consider the strong presence here already. In terms of COVID-19, yes, it's hitting all nations. And until yesterday, Brazil had 12 million people vaccinated. Actually, it says here up to March 15th, but 12 million up to yesterday. And vaccination proceeds, and we are taking preventive measures which are being taken place. I'm speaking, the offices are closed, and this might impact your subsidiary here because visits are not allowed. So it might be that your local general manager is trying to visit a customer and customers are not taking the visit. So yes, it is impacting the operations of businesses. And above everything, my word of optimism here is that, and please be careful. Do not make your decisions based on the news only or what you hear only. Make your decisions based on data and facts, and that's why we are here to support you. And having said that, I pass the floor to Didier to go straight to the corporate check and how we address that. Thank you very much for your attention, and now we remain here for questions afterwards. Thank you very much. Dankeschön.
Sergio, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. And at the end of this webinar, ladies and gentlemen, please do not hesitate to ask questions about the recent evolution of the Brazilian economy. So let's go now to the second part of the webinar, corporate checkup and restructuring. You can see on the right side of the screen a black box. Why a black box? You have a distributor in Brazil, and this distributor can be a black box. For instance, it doesn't pay your invoices any longer, or sales do not increase, or even worse, maybe are decreasing. You have a subsidiary in Brazil, and this subsidiary can also be a black box. Commercial strategy, taxes, human resources are not under control, and you need some explanations. Maybe you want to buy a company in Brazil. Still, the risk is to negotiate the price during 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. After the negotiation, you pay 50k euros to EY, KPMG, Deloitte, and you discover that it is not possible to buy the company because of risk, because of liabilities, unreliable financial statements, etc. So open the black box before beginning negotiation, otherwise you can lose time. So I will present 3 kinds of checkup, 3 kinds of diagnosis: my distributor, my subsidiary, and my acquisition target. So first, my distributor checkup. My distributor is a black box, and it doesn't pay your invoices any longer, or sales are not growing, or even worse, are decreasing. So first, collection problems. What to do? A financial audit. Make a financial audit of your distributor if your distributor does not pay your invoices any longer. But please make sure that you are auditing signed and certified balance sheets. In Brazil, all companies must have a CPA, an accountant, a public accountant. It's mandatory. And financial statements have no legal value if not signed and certified by a CPA. So please, before beginning your financial audit, make sure that you are auditing signed and certified accounting statements. Check the Serasa report of your distributor. What is Serasa? Serasa is a sort of Dun and Bradstreet company. It's a credit checking company. Print a Serasa report of your distributor. Serasa reports show overdue supplier invoices, overdue taxes, overdue bank loans repayment, credit rating. It can be green, it can be yellow, it can be orange, it can be red. There is always a credit recommendation in Brazilian reais, a limit of credit, a probability of bankruptcy. For instance, the probability of bankruptcy of your distributor is 50%, 20%, 90%, and many other interesting information, such as annual revenue of your distributor, name of the shareholders, name of the directors, number of employees, etc. So our recommendation is to analyze very carefully the Serasa report of your distributor. If your distributor is profitable, check where the money is going to. Payment of dividends or loans to shareholder. Please keep in mind that in Brazil, it is not prohibited for a company to lend money to shareholders. In many countries, this is a crime, misuse of assets. Not in Brazil, and actually it's a very common practice in Brazil for the company to lend money to shareholders and not shareholders to lend money to the companies. One example, I remember of a distributor who did not pay a client of ours, and there was a debt of around 340,000 euros. And auditing the financial statements, we discovered that there was a loan of the distributor, of the company, to the shareholder of 350,000 euros, which means that instead of paying the foreign suppliers, the distributor just transferred the money to the bank account of the shareholder. If the distributor is not profitable, please have a special focus on bank loans, because most Brazilian companies who face financial difficulties have bank loans, but with huge, really huge interest rates. In Europe, a normal interest rate is between 2 and 3% per year. In Brazil, it's at least 2.5 per month. It can be 5% per month, 8% per month. And in this case, there is no money left to pay your invoices. Your distributor is paying interest expenses to the bank, and I repeat, no money left to pay your invoices. Please keep in mind that most small companies in Brazil have a second in-house financial information system based on cash and not on balance sheet. They never read their balance sheet. They don't know what is a trial balance, a general ledger, or the balance sheet. And they do not realize how many interesting information you can find in statutory accounts. So, of course, our recommendation is to make a financial audit of your distributor, and you will probably understand why your distributor does not pay your invoices. Commercial problems. Sales do not grow as expected, or maybe even worse, are decreasing. Our recommendation is to make a commercial audit of your distributor. First, listen to your distributor to identify all external or internal reasons. Please let him speak. Listen very carefully. And then cross-check with experts and specialists, industry experts, tax experts, customs experts, etc. Try to identify the motivation of your distributor. Why it's a good operation for him or not to distribute your product. You have to investigate, because There is no business development if there is no motivation. What is the commercial strategy of your distributor? And of course, try to challenge your distributor. Have you given sales goals and target to your distributor? If not, give goals, give sales target, of course, target accepted by your distributor. Check what are necessary resources and necessary investment to develop sales. For instance, stock of goods, additional sales force, travelers, marketing, taxes, and so on. Because without resources and investments, there is no business development possible. And then build a business plan with your distributor and check the financial capability of your distributor, because without financial capability, there are no resources, no investments, and no business development. Please have a special focus on import duties and taxes. Check the taxation, the tax regime of your distributor, and ex tarifario. What is ex tarifario? Ex tarifario means exemption of tariff. If your product is not produced in Brazil, you can enter in contact with the Brazilian custom and ask for an exemption of import duties. And it works, really it works. So if, I repeat, your product is not produced in Brazil, try it, and you may have good news regarding exemption of import duties. Check also the taxation, the tax regime of your distributor. In Brazil, we have several tax regimes: lucro real, lucro presumido, simples, etc. When you import a product, you have to pay around 60% taxes, import duties and other taxes, PIS, COFINS, IPI, ICMS, let us say Brazilian VAT. If you have the proper tax regime, you can claim back around 40%, which means that it is 60% gross, but 20% net, because you can claim back 40%. 40% are tax deductible. If you have the proper tax regime, but if you don't have the proper tax regime, you may have no taxes deductible. And you can change in Brazil your tax regime every year. So please check if the tax regime of your distributor is a proper tax regime for an importer distributor. And please keep also in mind that this issue is also directly related to the negotiation with your distributor. I remember a European exporter who was negotiating with the distributor, the Brazilian distributor, and the distributor said, oh, when I import, I have to pay 60–65% taxes. I called him and I asked him, what is your tax regime? And he said, lucro real. And I said, yes, maybe 60–65 gross, but you will claim back 40%. So it is not 60. It's 20–25% net. And our client did not have this information. And in a negotiation, it makes a huge difference, of course. So before beginning any price negotiation with your distributor, check also the tax regime of your distributor. Check regional market coverage to find new opportunities. Brazil is a big country, like the United States. And maybe your distributor is in São Paulo, but does not have any coverage outside of São Paulo in other states. And maybe you will find new opportunities in other regions, in other states, maybe with other distributors. Check sales channel coverage of your distributor. For instance, you export to Brazil food and beverage, and your distributor is a specialist of supermarkets, not food service. Maybe you will have to find another distributor for food service, new sales channels. Check sales force versus sub-distributors. As Brazil is a big country, in some cases, your distributor, for instance, in São Paulo, have other sub-distributors in other states. But the problem is that you accumulate commissions and margin of the sub-distributors. And at the end of the day, you are not competitive any longer. So maybe in this case, for other states, you will have to find new distributors and ask your distributor only to sell, for instance, in São Paulo. Check the local competition, because you know that Brazil is a protectionist country and you may have local competition. Brazilian companies producing locally at a cheaper cost. And here I have a special warning about product registration. MAPA, which is the Ministry of Agriculture, INMETRO, Institute of Metrology, and ANVISA, which is a Drug and Food Administration in Brazil. Please keep in mind that the registration belongs to your distributor, and to register products, it takes time and money. Time, 6 months, 1 year, something more. Please keep in mind that if one day you want to terminate your contract with your distributor and find a new distributor, the new distributor will need time to register the products. So you have to negotiate a transition period with your distributor. Otherwise, your new distributor will need 6 months, 1 year to register the products, and you will be out of the market during this time. Conclusion, if you make this commercial audit, this commercial checkup, you will probably understand better why sales are not growing, and most of all, what to do to boost your sales in Brazil. My subsidiary checkup. You have a subsidiary in Brazil, and your subsidiary can be a black box and not under control. What to do? First, taxation. Why taxation? Because taxation in Brazil is expensive and complex. So it's a recurring issue for foreign companies established in Brazil. What are the most frequent issues related to taxation? First, huge accumulation of recoverable taxes, federal taxes or state taxes, ICMS, for instance, which is a sort of VAT. I'm going to give you some examples. Your subsidiary is profitable Q1, and in Brazil you have to pay corporate income tax on a monthly basis, so you pay income tax Q1. You are profitable Q2, so you pay income tax, corporate income tax Q2, and then you lose money. You have to claim back the corporate income tax and ask your CPA to claim the money back. If you don't ask your CPA to claim the money back, the income tax, he will not do it. So keep an eye on federal taxes, the accumulation of federal taxes. You can claim them back. There is a mechanism in Brazil called PERD-COMPI. State taxes, ICMS. I repeat, ICMS is a sort of state sales tax, VAT. I'm going to give you an example. You import a product in Brazil and the CIF price is 100. You import from São Paulo and ICMS rate is 18. So when you import, you have to pay 18, and 18 then are tax deductible, deductible of ICMS on sales. and you sell at a price of 200. And for instance, you export your product to another state. You import from São Paulo and you export to Rio, to Santa Catarina, Minas Gerais, etc. ICMS on sales in this case is 4%. So 4% of 200 means 8. So you collect 8, you have 18 deductible, you have a net credit of 10. And for state taxes, it's extremely complex to get your money back. So what you have to do is to enter in contact with a tax specialist first to get the money back. It takes a month, and we are talking about extremely complex and expensive formalities. But most of all, stop creating new credits. Instead of importing from São Paulo, you can import, for instance, from Santa Catarina state. There is a mechanism in Santa Catarina. You do not create tax credit because ICMS on import cannot be higher than ICMS on sales. So in my example, if your ICMS on sales is 4% of 200, which means 8, ICMS on import cannot be more than 8, and you do not create tax credit any longer. B, financial statements sent by my CPA, my external accountant, are not reliable. There is a big misunderstanding in Brazil about CPAs. They do not work for you. Of course, you pay the bill every month, but they work for tax authorities. 90% of the time is dedicated to tax returns. What is the consequence? Unreconciled financial statements, no tax advisory, no tax planning, accumulation of deductible taxes, and so on. So please do control your CPA, your external accountant. Ask your CPA to reconcile accounts. Ask your CPA to help to cut taxes. C, lack of commercial performance of your subsidiary. Actually, this issue can be audited as for distributors. Meet your sales director. Listen to your sales director to identify external and internal reasons. Let him speak, listen carefully, and then cross-check with customs experts, industry experts, regulatory experts, tax experts, and so on. Check the motivation of your team. No motivation, no business development. Try to understand if your sales director has a clear commercial strategy and challenge him. Do you have enough resources or investment for your business development? Brazil is a big country, and prospection costs are expensive in Brazil. Try to cut taxes to be more competitive, tax regime, ex-tarifario. Check the regional market coverage and try to find new opportunities in other states and other regions. Sales channel coverage. Same example, you export food and beverage and your subsidiary only sell to supermarket. Try to prospect also food service. Meet your client and prepare the meeting very carefully, and please listen very carefully to your customers and clients. And check local competition, because I repeat, Brazil is a protectionist country and you may have local competitors cheaper. Here I have two warnings. First warning, customers' lack of transparency. You know, in Europe, yes is yes, no is no, and clients and customers are direct. Not in Brazil. You meet your customers, they like your product, they tell you, oh, I'm going to buy your products, I'm going to sign your contracts, and 10 years later, you have not sold anything to them. So it's not easy. That's why I say, please let them speak and listen very carefully, because they are not as direct as in Europe. Second warning, local production. Brazil is a protectionist country, and you may have in some cases to produce locally to be more competitive. So thanks to this checkup, this commercial checkup, you will be able to understand why your subsidiary is not selling enough, and most of all, what to do to boost your sales in Brazil. My acquisition target checkup, I repeat, before beginning the negotiation, open the black box, try to understand if your acquisition target is a company that you can buy or not, because the risk is to lose months and months of negotiation, and after to understand that it's not possible to buy this company. First, valuation. Many Brazilian companies do not have reliable financial statements. I repeat, they have a second in-house financial system based on cash, not on balance sheet and accrual. And even if the financial statements are signed by a CPA, in some cases, they may not be reliable. So please ask for reconciled account, make an audit, try to check if there are or not unrecorded expenses. For instance, salaries paid in cash, suppliers paid in cash, directors' compensation paid by dividends and not with a recorded salary. And if you come to the conclusion that the official statements are not reliable and cannot be adjusted, unfortunately, you will not be able to make your valuation. Here, I have a special warning about tax regime, Simples Nacional. It's a very good tax regime. You pay less corporate tax and you pay less sales taxes. Still, this tax regime is not allowed for subsidiary of foreign investors, which means that if you want to buy a company which tax regime is Simples Nacional, for your valuation, you have to take into account that this excellent tax regime will not be kept, and you have to take this into account in your valuation. Licenses. Brazil is a country of licenses, federal, state, city alvara, environmental licenses, Ministry of Agriculture, Anvisa, the Food and Drug Administration, in metro certification, etc. So before beginning negotiations, check all licenses of the company of your target and the expiration date. Middle management. Many small companies are a one-man show and they don't have a middle management, which means that when you buy the company, you have to hire people, which means that the EBITDA of the company is artificially high, and you have to take this issue into account in your valuation. Check if taxes and social charges are paid. Check if there are some litigation with dispute with suppliers, dispute with clients, with employees, etc. And most of all, organize an on-site visit of the factory, meeting with the directors, etc., to detect any kind of major risk or issue. Just one example, we have a client who would like to buy a company in Brazil, and I visited the factory last November. And during the visit, I noticed a very strong and toxic smell of chemicals in the factory. And if my client buys this company, he will have to invest at least 1 million euros in air treatment equipments, with a direct impact, of course, not on EBITDA, but on the valuation of the company. So before beginning the negotiation, please make a pre-due diligence, and if it is green light, then you can begin your negotiation. Conclusion. I would say that my main conclusion is anticipate, prevent, rather than cure, because it's too late if you have to cure. So, for instance, check the financial statements and the Serasa reports of your distributor once a year, twice a year. Do not let taxes of your subsidiary accumulate. Ask your CPA to do his job. Audit monthly the financial statement of your subsidiary and ask your external accountant to send you account reconciliation. Visit your customer, visit your team, visit your clients, your supplier, your distributor. Brazil is a complex country, and always keep in mind that the Brazilians are very reactive to solve problems, but not always proactive enough to prevent problems. We have here a real lack of planning and anticipation. So educate your CPA or your team to be more proactive and to anticipate more problems. Brazil is a complex country, and our last recommendation is to implement in your subsidiary or in your joint venture an effective governance to keep the situation under control. Vielen Dank, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Didier, and thank you, Sergio. So
do we have
I
some
have
questions? Thomas?
Yes, I can. Pardon, I have not switched on my camera. Yes, I have some questions here, and I think the first one I better read out without mentioning any names. So it's basically like this. The question is, let's assume there's a product which normally costs 100 if you deliver it to Brazil. The CIF should be 100. Now the distributor in Brazil is complaining and saying, hey, I pay too much import duties. So is it also possible, let's say, that they, so to sell this product to Brazil only for 50 CIF, and then the local distributor invoices the remaining rest, the other 50%, in form of a service invoice or something like that, and then transfers back the money? So, critical question.
I have another question, Thomas. It's not the first time I hear this question. First of all, I would say that the risk is not for the exporter, the risk is for the distributor. Then it's quite dangerous. If the exporter is already selling this product in Brazil, keep in mind that the Brazilian customs have many statistics. So if the distributor is importing today for 100 and suddenly tomorrow morning 50, the Brazilian customs, they have their statistics, they will say, why are you importing today at the CIF price of 50? Yesterday it was 100. It will not work. It will not work. If it is a new product, maybe it will work, but please keep in mind that they have some statistics. So depending on the product, they might know that, for instance, a kilo of sausages cost €1 and not 50 cents. So they have statistics of other importers in Brazil importing the same product. So first, we are not sure that it will work, and it might be dangerous for the distributor. Second, is it a good operation? I'm not sure, because if in Brazil you import a service, you have to pay around 50% taxes. You have to pay siege, PIS, COFINS, income tax, etc., around 50%. So I'm not sure that for the distributor to pay a service invoice will be cheaper. So my main conclusion is that it's extremely dangerous, most of all, if the product used to be imported by the distributor and suddenly the seed price is not 100 but becomes 50. And second, I'm even not sure that it will be cheaper paying at least 50% of taxes on imports of services.
Got it. So at the end of the day, it would make sense, I mean, first of all, to check is this the right distributor, because maybe he can even claim back some parts of the import duties, as you just said in your presentation. Okay, so there are many questions to these import tariffs, but I think this is difficult to answer. So I can just ask the audience, just raise that questions maybe again in an email, also mentioning the HSN codes, and then we can have a discussion face-to-face, a Teams meeting to dive more into detail. I think this is too much if we now go into details in this tariffs for different products here in this webinar. There is, in Germany, we have something which is called Schufa. So that's an authority. So if you don't pay your MasterCard bills, you get a red dot there and you don't get a credit anymore. Is this Serasa, and how do you how to get this Serasa report? I have 5 questions to Serasa.
Serasa is like, for instance, Dun & Bradstreet, which is an American company. You can print the report online. You need to have a subscription. And Altios, we have a subscription. So if you send me the name of the distributor, and most of all, what we call here the CNPG number, which is equivalent to the VAT number, I can print the report and send the reports. These reports are extremely interesting for the following reason. I sell a product or a service to a Brazilian company. I'm Brazilian and I sell a product or a service to my customer. If he doesn't pay me, I can go very quickly to what we call here cartório, which is a kind of notary, and to say officially that I have not received the money of my invoice. And this information becomes public. That's why Serasa is connected with all cartórios in Brazil, and they know immediately if, for instance, in this case, the distributor, the client of the German company, is not paying banks, is not paying taxes, or is not paying his Brazilian suppliers. If you send me the name of the distributor of the Brazilian company, and I repeat, the CNPG number equivalent to the VAT number, I can print the report and tell you if they have a good rating or not.
Okay. Next question is, there's a company is an automotive component vendor, and they have a plant for processing parts in Brazil. Now the question is, can they ship raw material for this processing from Europe to the Brazilian plant? and then get the ready-made product back, and let's say not to pay the full import duties or to claim back import duties, something like this possible?
You mean they export raw materials to Brazil, they produce in Brazil, and they re-export to Germany, for instance?
Exactly, they only have the product, so to say, for processing in Brazil, but not with the intention to sell in Brazil. So the plant in Brazil is verlängerte Werkbank. It's like in...
No, okay. I would make two comments. The first comment is that Brazil used to be a very expensive country, and now it's cheaper to produce in Brazil. And I can see many clients who are now using Brazil, not only as a market, but also as a production basis for Europe, because production cost has decreased in Brazil in the last years. Yes, there is a drawback system, Thomas. You can export to Brazil a raw material. You do not pay import duties. Sergio, you probably know very well this system of drawback. You don't pay the duties, and you have, I don't remember, 1 year or 2 years to re-export then the product.
Oh, that's a lot of time. Okay, so I think also here...
If I might add some comment to that, that's important what Didier just mentioned, because with the current exchange rate, which is it's really making favorable to export from Brazil. So this is something. If you have a plant in Brazil, rethink in your strategy what this plant can be capable of delivering back to you, and then you might get some benefits from this exchange rate, which is not favorable to importing to Brazil, but it's extremely favorable to exporting from Brazil. So this gives you a hinge on competitiveness.
Very good. So you already replied the next question, which is in regard to the currency exchange rate, which causes trouble. So the reply is start producing in Brazil, yeah, because of the currency situation, and because at the moment it's just difficult. The real is too weak, yeah. So, so the question in this case is more how to cope with this. What are your expectations regarding the real? Do you think it will be like that, weak, or will it recover, or what will happen?
So Thomas, first, it's the right moment to buy a company in Brazil because it's cheap. It is quite cheap. Before the pandemic, the exchange rate was 470, 480 reais against €1, and today 650. So I don't know if Sergio agrees, but it's the right moment to buy a company in Brazil. The expectation is that after the pandemic, we should go back to a more reasonable exchange rate. There is no predictability in our world today, so it's difficult to exactly answer when and how much, maybe 520. I don't know if Sergio agrees, but in my opinion, even if the exchange rate go back to, let us say, 5 reais against €1, Brazil will remain a cheap country. 5-6 years ago, Brazil was an expensive country. It was extremely expensive to produce in Brazil and to export 5, 6, 7 years ago. Sergio, what do you think? Do you think that Brazil will remain cheap? Maybe not as cheap as today during the pandemic, but do you think Brazil will remain cheap country?
I think the current exchange rate is not real. It is inflated, so it may decrease a little bit. So my bet is 4.9 up to 5 reals per euro. And please keep in mind that Brazil is an important country, a market you cannot neglect, and a country which companies abiding by the rules, they can be extremely profitable. That's why we have companies here completing 150 years that they are operating in Brazil and they have not left. So If you abide by the rules, you have great chances to tackle this market.
That's a wonderful word for closing this session, and exactly at 3 p.m. So really, this is German Brazilian style, I would say. Yeah. So I want to thank you both very much. Yeah, for your time. I hope that everybody liked our webinar. We have not been able to now reply all your questions, but we will come back to you after the webinar if you raise questions, and if you have additional ones, please just drop an email and we will be happy to come back to you. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank.
Dankeschön.
Vielen Dank. Dankeschön. Thank you and bye-bye. So we will now just close the session.